I would like to now introduce tonight's main speaker, Norma. Norma's little.
Good evening. My name's Norma, and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank my uncle for asking me to come out on this beautiful rainy day. And I want to apologize for wearing pants because I know it's not appropriate dress, especially Levi's. You know, my sponsor would not have it. But you know what? I was cold. I'm going to be warm. I said anybody in their right mind wouldn't come out on a rainy day. Hello, all you guys are here. I want to congratulate the chip takers and also the birthday people. I want to welcome the newcomers to Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to let you know it works good and it works slow. Huh? Everything I'm going to say here tonight's my opinion only. I don't know if this is the way my life went down, but it's the way I see it. You can tell I'm a Mexican, right? And I'm of the Mexican variety that my family had parties Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You know, and I believe that I was born a liar, a cheat, and a manipulator. That comes natural to me. You know, Bill W. wrote, the common becomes the uncommon, and that's the most common thing for me. And when I was a little girl, they used to give us all a glass of beer. And I used to go from relative to relative to get me that beer. You know, in the olden days, they didn't buy six-packs or cases of beer. They bought kegs of beer. And, you know, they used to keep it in the bathtub with those big blocks of ice and those chunks of salt. And I remember I used to sneak in there and pump me some of that foam. I loved the way that foam tasted. And I used to go from relative to get me some beer. I loved the way it tasted. I loved the excitement I got from drinking that keg beer. When I was a little girl, the first feeling I ever remember feeling is I felt unloved, unwanted, and I was always feeling lonely and empty and sad as a little girl. I remember I used to sleep in a little walk-in closet, and I remember that my sister got to sleep with my mother, and I would wake up in the middle of the night crying and yearning for my mother. I never understood why I couldn't sleep with my mother. The truth of the matter is I wet the bed. That's why I didn't get to sleep with my mother. But when you're 4 years old, you don't know that's the reason. I just felt like my mother didn't love me. I just didn't feel like she wanted me. I was terrified of my mother. That's what I remember the most. You see, I was a battered kid. I was always getting beat a lot. But let me tell you what kind of kid I was. You know, when I was a little girl, I used to live behind my grandmother's house, and I adored my grandmother. And my grandmother used to have a 2-pound box of See's candy in the refrigerator. And they never let us have any candy or any potato chips or any soda. They said it was bad for your hair, bad for your teeth. So when nobody was around, I'd sneak on in there, and I'd start eating that chocolate, and I'd slam it in my face. I still eat it that way today. Anyway, I'd slam it in my face, and my mother would show up. And she'd say, Norma, did you eat that chocolate? And I'd say no. And she'd start giving me that rapid fire. I didn't eat it. And she's, you know, giving me that 1, 2. And then she'd grab me by my arm, take me to the mirror, and there'd be chocolate all over my face. And I don't know how it got there. You see, I would lie under any and all conditions. Something inside of me said, don't tell. If you tell, it's going to be worse. So I always, whatever lie I had at the moment, I was keeping it, and they couldn't beat the truth out of me. I had my first blackout drunk when I was 8 years old. We moved from Orange County to Mira Loma. We had a 3-day weekend party, a baptism. I remember it was Friday and then it was Sunday. And I remember I came to, it must have been about 1 or 2 in the afternoon on Saturday, and I remember I came to and I was walking past one of the windows of this house, and I could hear them inside talking about me, who had given me so much, and did they see how drunk I was? And that was the first time I felt shame and remorse. I didn't know what I did, but I knew it was bad. I'm also a recovering Catholic, if there's any Catholics in here. But back in those days, you used to go into this room, tell the priest your sins. Well, I'd go in there and say maybe I lied once or twice, nothing bad. I never told the truth. And I might have stole a half of a little thing, nothing that counted, right? So I remember that in the olden days, you take a little host, and you're supposed to take this little host, but you're not supposed to eat before you take it. I always ate just to see what God's going to do, because they always said God's going to punish me. So I didn't care who I was testing. I was always testing somebody, and when that happened, I was also going to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school for a hot minute. And I remember I used to go out to where the horses were. You see, my mother was an alcoholic, and she was very physically violent. And I remember that my mother would beat me. And then after she beat me, after time would go by, she'd come back and she'd love on me. And she would cry. And she would say she was sorry. That, she just didn't want us to be bad. She didn't want us to be like her. And I remember that I used to go out to where the horses were, and I used to sing to God to please bring me my daddy back. Because when my daddy was around, my mother wasn't so violent. And I remember when I was a kid, that they used to say that my daddy was in college. The truth of the matter is my dad was a heroin addict, and he was in the joint a lot. So I used to go out there and pray for God to please bring me my daddy back. And I remember I used to go and look for him in the barns and in the cupboards, because I thought that someplace my daddy and my good mommy was gagged someplace. And I truly believed it. I used to look for her where we kept the oats and where we kept the hay. And when I didn't find them, I got mad at God and I gave him the finger. And I said, I will never say your name again. I am never going to pray to you again. And I meant it with everything I had. When I was 10 years old, my mother got sober. For before we lived in Miraloma, where it was country and farming, we moved to Pomona, where the girls ratted their hair up, wore tight skirts in the 5th grade, okay? And they used to wait for me and my sister every day after school to give us our initiation. And I remember I used to cry to the teacher, they're going to beat us up. Well, on the last day of school, the guys and the girls got together and they cornered my sister and they jumped her. And I remember I went and I flagged down some guy, and he came and he pulled my sister out of there. And when we went home that day, we went and we told my mother. And one more time, I wasn't good enough. You see, my mom got on that phone, and she started calling the schools, and she made sure my sister didn't have to go back to that school. She got to go to another school. And one more time, I wasn't loved enough. One more time, I wasn't good enough, because I had to go back to that school. And every day after school, those girls would wait for me to beat me up. And I used to cry to those teachers and tell them that they're waiting for me outside. I'm also a thief. When my mother gets sober, she decides to go on a diet. I'm also a Mexican reject. I wasn't raised on beans and rice and tortillas. I was raised on pot pies, TV dinners, and bologna sandwiches. And that's still my diet today. I still love bologna sandwiches. But my mother was an alcoholic. She did not cook. She made beans one time and she put spinach in it, okay? You know what? It doesn't taste that bad. Anyway, so when my mother gets sober, she decides to go on a diet. And then there was there was no bread anymore. There was just like carrots and celery and those nasty diet Shasta soda with that saccharin in it. So I used to do these little burglaries to go eat at other people's houses at lunch. I never thought about stealing their stuff. I only went over there to eat. Anyway, in those olden days, they used to have those double desks. Well, the girl I shared my desk with was a white girl. I wasn't intimidated with white. I was raised with white. I felt the same as white. I was intimidated with the Mexicans. You see, because I wasn't Mexican enough. Because I didn't speak Spanish then. And because I didn't carry a burrito then. And I didn't look like them. I didn't sound like them. Anyway, the girl I shared my desk with was a white girl. And I called her a monkey. And she took it personal. So when I went to go do one of my eating excursions, she's coming down the playground with a couple of her friends to confront me about calling her that name, right? And her mouth starts to move like my mother's, right? It starts perspiring up here. Next thing I know, I hit her, I black out, I break her arm, and all those cholas said, "Don't cry, Norma. Wait till you get to the bathroom." You see, finally, somebody was going to pay for the things that were going on at my house, you see. You see, not only was I a victim to my mother physically and mentally, but also to my older sister. At home, I was a victim. And that day, I learned to be a victimizer. So I started running my hair up, start taking in my mother's skirts, and watch a little Hobo Kelly before I'm doing this, right? And my mother was a great AA'er. She went to meetings every day. From 7:30 to 10 o'clock, Mama was at the meetings. From 7:30 to 9:45, we had the boys over. We're doing a little spray paint, a little glue, my drug of choice is whatever you got, right? Well, there was no alcohol in the house, so we did whatever you had. And every now and then Mama would come home early from the meeting, and she'd beat the heck out of us and the guys. What happened is that I got into a lot of trouble at this school, and my mother moved us to the other side of Pomona. The book talks about seeking lower companions. I took 3 buses to get to the barrio. I was the best dressed chola in the barrio. Not only that, but all the girls wanted to be my friend. Why? Because I had money, and I'd buy it. And if they had a problem, I'd take care of it. I had a lot of suppressed anger. So if somebody had a beef with you, I was up Front Street. Anyway, we move again to Montclair, which did not have a ghetto. And, I'm one of those kind of persons that can fit anywhere. So I joined drill team. And one day when I was in in between classes, how some of you guys know about going to the bathroom and smoking a cigarette. So I went in the bathroom, smoked a cigarette, and all the girls are talking about this guy. He's 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyes. He has a nice car and a car show, and he doesn't go to school. All the girls wanted him. I had to have him. Anyway, I married this guy, and he introduces me to Boone's Farm apple wine. I figure if everybody wants him, he's worth having, right? Anyway, he introduces me to Boone's Farm apple wine and Reds. Shoot, I thought I was violent before. As soon as I got that combination in me. It's funny, I don't know any social drinkers that take a little sleeping pill to go along with their wine. And anyway, I marry this guy, and we go to this house party. And he's going to the liquor store. And when he's coming in the door, some chick is coming in the door. She has a bag in her arm. I knew he was with her. So there was a beer bottle by me. I broke it on his face just in case. Shortly after that, I try to kill him again. And when he gets out of the hospital, his family sends him to Ontario, Canada. And when I get out of juvenile hall, I say, I'm really going to kill this guy. And this is during the time when everybody was thumbing it. Some of you remember when everybody ganged together and jumped in a car and hitchhike all over the place? Anyway, I'm going to hitchhike and kill this guy, right? I've never been out of Montclair. And anyway, I start hitchhiking, and I get as far as Columbus, Ohio. I want you to know there are no Mexicans in Columbus, Ohio. But you know what? I started partying. I started having fun. I forgot what my primary purpose was, right? Anyway, my mom contemplated suicide, and I came back to Montclair. And when I came back, I made a decision. I said, I'm getting rid of that wine and those Reds. That stuff makes me too violent. I know what I need. I need to get me a job. I need to buy myself a 64 Chevy. The kind with a big steering wheel? But I get a little 6-inch because I can't see over the top. And I get rid of that wine and those Reds. That stuff's terrible. So I switched to a little 151 Bacardi and RC Cola. God, I loved RC Cola with Bacardi. And I was the kind of person, I bought the gallon of 151. I wanted to make sure I had enough. By then we moved to Orange County. And I'm claiming Ontario is my barrio. I'm from Ontario. That's my hood. Ontario and Orange County is about, 45 minutes away? Anyway, that's where I'm from. And I used to go over there and beat up the girls from out of town, and I was from out of town. And we used to ride our hair real high. We'd put those big old cascades during the cascade time with a big hairdo, get it as high as you can. Wear those double eyelashes. Like Mercy was saying, wear the raccoon eyes, big old lines, and we'd go and beat up the girls from out of town. And the next day we'd go look for our hair where the girls pulled it out. And like Mercy said, I loved when the cops came. I loved when they came with the shields and the helicopter. I loved all that exciting stuff. And I always wanted to be in the mix. I always wanted to be right there in the action. And that was exciting for me. And then on Sunday, when it was time to come home, it's really normie time. Or now our time, we would call it 3 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, right? But then I still called it Sunday. I figured if I hadn't been asleep yet, it's still considered Sunday. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd drive from Ontario to Orange County. And, I've been drinking all weekend. And right before, I'm pulling up to my house, and I drop a little whites. So I can go to sleep and hear the alarm when I get up. Because if I go to sleep, I ain't going to hear nothing. I'm going to pass out. And I remember I would lay down in the room, would start to spin. And I got to hurry up and fall asleep before those whites kick in. And it seems like the alarm just went off. I just shut my eyes, and I'd wake up with the shakes. I'm 17, okay? I wake up with the shakes, and I drag myself to the bathroom, and I have that taste in my mouth. So I got to go brush my teeth, right? So I just, do a little quickie, nothing drastic because it makes me gag. And I'm reeking of all that 151 Bacardi, so I need to take a shower. But I don't. I just had a little extra perfume nobody will notice, right? And drop a few little wintergreen lifesavers so nobody could smell it, right? And I'd drag myself to work. And I'd have that conversation that tonight it's going to be different. Tonight I'm going to go home and get me some rest. Tonight I'm not calling the girls. I never considered myself a daily drinker, but I'll tell you what, at lunchtime, when the guys were going to go have an 80-ouncer, I was in the car. I was always drinking an 80-ouncer. Beer didn't count for me. See, if it wasn't 151 Bacardi, it wasn't considered drinking. So I would go at lunchtime and have this 80-ouncer, and I'd come back to work, drop some more whites, and have that conversation all day long. Tonight it's going to be different. Tonight I'm going to go home and get me some rest. And I don't know what would happen to me when I'd punch that clock. I'd punch that clock and I'd say, I wonder what the girls are doing. And I'd call them up and start it all over again. You see, at the beginning, I started drinking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then it went to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday, hump day. And then it went to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And all of a sudden, it all seemed to blend in. Anyway, it must have been one of those off days, like a dumb Tuesday or something. My cousin invited me to his relative's house. He was going over to his in-laws. And that night, I went with him, and I had a shot of whiskey. I don't know if you'll be an alcoholic of my variety, but a shot of whiskey like this is just an opener. You see, my opinion is the difference between a social drinker and an alcoholic is a social drinker is having a good time and drinks to enhance the good time. And an alcoholic of my variety drinks for the good time. You see, when I'm Bonnaroo in my clothes, I'm drinking. When I'm putting that war paint on, I'm drinking. I even drink in the shower. I drive and drink, doesn't everybody? The party started a long time ago when I left work. And that day when I went over to his house, I had a shot of whiskey this size. And like I said, it must have been a dumb Tuesday. And then I blacked out, and the next day, my cousin's wife, who did not drink, said I had been all over a cousin of mine, that I had been sitting on his lap and stroking his hair, and I cringed at the idea, because, you see, I hated him. When I was a little girl, he was always trying to molest me, and I was terrified of him. So when she had told me that, I got a little concerned. You see, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of AA meetings. I've been coming to Alcoholics Anonymous since I was 10 years old, and I'm 46 and a half years old now. And I went to hundreds and hundreds of AA meetings. My mother brought me to AA meetings when I was in trouble, and I was in trouble a lot. And I would sit in that seat, and I would hear those speakers, and I would like those exciting stories. And what I figured is, you guys had a lot of fun when you're drinking. Now there's nothing to do. You're old and you're here, right? like there's no place else to go. You know, I never heard anything. And I was very resentful at Alcoholics Anonymous. Because, see, we used to go to those potlucks, those picnics, and all those things that all those things that Alcoholics Anonymous participate in. And I'd be in those picnics, and some strange lady would come up to me, and she'd say, "Are you Angie's daughter?" And I'd say, "Yes." And she would say, "Well, how's that problem you're having at school?" And I'd get so angry at my mother. Why does she have to be telling everybody our business? I don't even know this lady. So I could not stand Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember giving my mother's first year cake. You see, my mother was still physically abusing me 6 years into her sobriety. And the first year when she came up to the podium, she got up, me and my sister gave her cake, and she got to the podium, and she said how everything was getting better and how her life was changing. And I looked over at my sister and I said, "Will the real Angie please stand up?" You see, because I thought Alcoholics Anonymous was a cure. I thought she was going to become this mother that I had the illusion of what a mother should be. So anyway, when that happened with my cousin, we read it in chapter 3. I thought maybe I might have a problem. I remember I used to line my bedroom. My bedroom window had a sill on it, and I was on the street side. My mother must have been about 10 years sober. And I remember a sweet lady named Irish Annie, who has passed away. She came up to me and she asked me if I had a problem drinking. And I said, "Heck no, I don't have a problem drinking. I'm having fun." Because I love what alcohol did for me. You know, and so when that happened to me, you know, I started thinking, well, maybe I better chill out. So, you know, we read in chapter 3, so I start jogging 7-10 miles a day. I decide to dabble in that other inspirational book. I decide to go to college. And I just smoke a little weed. You know, weed ain't bad. It's natural. It's God-given, right? And I take a hard class like political science. Smoke a joint before the final. Read the same sentence over and over. Get an F. Next semester, same seat, same instructor. Never missed a day in class. Great notes. Smoke a joint on the final. Get stuck on the same sentence. Read it over and over. I did that 4 semesters in a row. Common sense would have told you it was the weed, right? Not me. My common sense said at that time, I know what the problem is. The problem is I'm stupid. My mother always said I was stupid, and I believed her. I didn't know it was the weed until I got sober. Because, see, I never got off that first sentence. Never. And I was a great student. I moved into a reborn Christian complex, a beautiful, furnished reborn Christian complex, since I was dabbling in the other book. Since I wasn't drinking, I wasn't violent, right? So my girlfriend came over. Like I said, I was just smoking weed. My girlfriend came over, and she brought these 2 guys over. And I had a shot of tequila. And then it was 2 pints. She asked one of the guys where he lived. He said someplace by the Orange Circle. My mother lived by the Orange Circle. There was a baseball bat by me. Picked up the bat, beat the shit out of my girlfriend, destroyed the apartment. The guys left. The cops came and got in a physical confrontation with the cops. Ran out the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, knocked on the landlady's door and said, "Pray for me," as they're taking me to jail. And it had been 3 years since I had a drink. And I'd been to enough meetings to know some stuff. I heard some stuff here. And in the olden days, they used to stick you in a little rubber room. And I remember they came and got me about 5:30 in the morning. My hair was all thrashed. One of my eyes were missing. A big old shiner where a cop hit me. And my nylons were ripped. I didn't have any shoes. I didn't have any money. And some nice bus driver let me get on the bus. And I remember seeing you guys going to work, and you look so clean and smiley and okie dokie. And when I went home that day and I got into bed, I said, I'm never going to do that again. So what I did is I switched to a little social heroin. You know, heroin don't stay social very long. You see, I will do anything to keep from being an alcoholic. This is a progressive illness. And I started doing all the things I swore I wouldn't do. You know, the book talks about incomprehensible demoralization. You know that I can barely pronounce those words, but I do know what it is to live on. And it's the hardest part of my story to talk about, especially today because it's raining. You see, what happened is I am a victimizer, and I lived in one of my grandmother's houses, and she lived a distance from me, and I kept renting that house to illegal aliens. I figure if they told on me, I'd call immigration. Well, I rented it out to so many people. They all got together, and they told on me. And when they came and got me and took me to jail, when I got out of jail, I had absolutely no place and nowhere to go, because I had long since burnt all my bridges, all my family, all my loved ones, all my fellow colleagues at college, my professors, and all the people that had kindness in their heart for me. I burnt them all. I burnt them for money. I lied and I cheated and I manipulated. And so when I got out of jail, I had no place to go. So I put all my things in a shopping cart. You know, that wasn't my goal in life. I put all my things in a shopping cart. I was 28 years old. And I remember I would be walking down the streets on a cold, rainy night like tonight. You know, and I remember that I'd be all wet, smelling like a wet dog. I weighed 76 pounds. I plucked all my eyebrows out, all my eyelashes. I had a big bald spot in the back of my head. I was wearing a size 7 little girls. Because, see, by that time, heroin quit working for me also. So I incorporated a little cocaine. You see, I just could not stand how I felt inside. And nothing was curing it anymore. And when I used to walk those streets at night, I used to wonder what happened to me. I would see you in the morning, going to work, being so clean, driving your cars, and I wonder what happened to my life. This is not what I wanted from my life. Didn't life know that my mom was sober? Didn't they know that my life had changed when my mother got sober? But you see, I was out to get her. You see, but I am an alcoholic. I suffer from the disease of perception. And what happened is I put all my things in that shopping cart, and I used to push my shopping cart around. You know, I never sold my body when I was out in the street because I didn't think anybody would buy it. I suffered from a lot of low self-worth and a lot of low self-esteem. And I didn't look very pretty because I had sores all over my face, all over my hands. I'm that alcoholic you see on the corner that's talking to themselves. I'm that alcoholic in the corner that you see that hasn't bathed or changed their clothes. Do you ever wonder where they use the restroom? You know, I used to go to the gas station and ask them to use the restroom. They would say it was out of order. I know what it is to somebody want to buy you some food and they tell you have to wait outside. And that's not what I wanted from my life. That wasn't my goal in life. You see, I used to eat out of trash cans, but none of that dumpster stuff. I was not a dumpster diver. I only ate out of good trash cans, you know, like the Roadway Inn or Holiday Inn or something good, McDonald's, but that wasn't what I wanted from life. It seemed that life got so far away from me, the reality of my life. I made lots of trips to the county jail. I'm the only one that I know that would cry when it was time to leave, 'cause I just didn't want to do it anymore. I would walk around in the middle of the night and feeling so empty and so lonely. My mother had closed the door long, long before that. And I remember when I used to walk those streets and at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would be yearning for a little oatmeal and a little warm toast. So I'd go to the Salvation Army and I'd wait there all night long. And as the ladies were preparing the food, I remember I'd walk down that line and I'd get me some cold toast. And you can tell I have a big mouth. I'd start hollering and screaming and complaining. I've been here all night long. Doesn't she know I just want some warm toast? And she'd kick me out of the Salvation Army eating lines. I was always a victim when I lived on the streets. You know, and what happened for me is that I've been to jail lots of times. Every time I go to jail, I call Mama up. And I called her many, many times. And this one time, my crime partner was going to prison, and she said, "Norma, you better call your mother and ask for help." And like I said, I called my mother many, many times. And she said, "For God's sake, Norma, I'm making dinner for Johnny Harris. If you want to get sober, you write to this place in Indio." I never heard of Indio. She said it was someplace by Palm Springs. I went around that jail telling everybody I'm going to Betty Ford. Mama said she was going to send me to the best recovery home she knew. I'm going to be sunning and mudding with Elizabeth Taylor. You know, I always have to be a cut above, right? And, I never would have fit there. I told you what I looked like. Anyway, they pick me up and they take me out to the desert. I don't know if you guys been to Indio, but it's nothing but sand and tumbleweeds. So we're getting off the freeway. I think we're going for coffee. We pull up in front of this two-story house. Nobody's there. It's late at night. We roll around, go down this alley. And one side of the alley where we stop is a shooting gallery. You know what a shooting gallery is? It's an old, beat-up house with no windows, a lot of graffiti. It was home, places where I had stayed. And on the other side was a big old house, and there was these 4 cats. Everybody knows what cats means mice. I go, shoot, I got loaded in better places than this. And I was always so arrogant. And I always remember AA as being nothing but old people. And bigger than hootenanny, here comes this old lady down the steps. She tells me to sleep on the couch and don't use the phone. You know, all night I'm thinking, who can I call? Somebody get me out of here. But there was nobody. And when that sweet old woman took me to her office, and she has passed away, she asked that question you're not supposed to ask arrogant people. She asked me what my drug of choice was, and I said heroin. And she said, did you ever use alcohol? And I said, yes. And she said, can you see how your alcoholism led you to try other things? And I believed that that was my first moment of clarity. She said, therefore you identify yourself as an alcoholic. You no longer want to be different. The person that might save your life that day might just be an alcoholic and not relate to the others. She said, you get a sponsor and you work the steps. I got a sponsor who had 27 years of sobriety. I want someone who knew some stuff. Not only that, but my mother had 23 and a half years of sobriety, and my sister had 8, and I didn't want a day they had. I remember when my sister called me up and told me she was coming to AA. I go, God, Lorraine, you just want to be like Mom. I sent her a little weed. She broke her sobriety. Obviously, she wasn't done. I helped remove all doubt, right? I have made my amends to my adorable sister. That sister that I was so envious of is my best friend, and I love her very dearly. Anyway, I was so resentful at those 2 ladies and so resentful at Alcoholics Anonymous, so I wanted someone who knew some stuff. So I started working the steps. And I told you when I was 8 years old, I gave God the finger. And I said I was never going to pray to him. I was never one of those persons in jail say, God, get me out. I never said his name. And, the step says, the God of our own understanding. When I found out this was a God thing, my hair went curly. It's like, oh, my God. But then it was too late. You see, one day I was walking through that clubhouse and somebody or some way or some thought came to me and said, Norma, you have been a phony all your life. Just pretend there's something. And in the desert, it's windy a lot. So I chose the wind as my God. And I could hear it move the trees, but I could not see it. And every time it touched my face, I acknowledged that that was God. In the morning, I would say, please keep me sober tonight. In the morning, I'd say, please keep me sober today. And in the nighttime, I'd say, thank you. When I was 8 months sober, they let me have a little job. And on November 27th of 1989, I was at work, and I worked in a warehouse, in a hardware store, and the assistant manager asked me to take out some Christmas trees, and I'm complaining, I'm hollering, why are they having me take out the Christmas tree? They should get one of the guys. I'm the only female here. What come the guys ain't doing? So I'm taking the Christmas trees resentfully out of the attic, and I'm moving them, and I'm getting further and further into the attic. Next thing I know, the attic gives way, and I fall 2 stories. And I remember when I fell those next time you're at Home Depot, look up, that's 2 stories. I fell through that ceiling and I slammed into those metal shelves, and I was going so quickly that it sprung me back up and I slammed down again. And I landed on my feet both times. And I didn't break anything, just a couple of teeth, but they were probably on the rot anyway, But that day, I knew that God had a plan for me. That day, all doubt was removed. You see, because I would have tried to save myself if I could have. That's when my life really started changing, when I really recognized that God had spared me for a reason, to be of service. And when I was 14 months sober, that grandma that I adored, she died. And I got mad at God. And I said, take my mama, take my sister, 2 for 1, but give me my grandma back. You see, I got to make my amends to my grandmother, but I wasn't done loving on her. I wasn't done yet. I wanted more time with her. And when God takes something away, he always replaces it with something else, you see. Because I had to pick up the piece of paper and the pen, and I had to write 5 more inventories on my mother and my sister so I could let them off the hook. Because I have such an expectation of what I think they should be. I have an idea of what the kind of mom I want or the kind of sister I want. I always felt like I wasn't part of their family. Anyway, I have a great relationship with my mother and my sister. I adore my sister. I learned how to be a sister through being a sister with my sobriety sisters. Anyway, what happened is, I forgot to tell you, I had 7 affairs my first year and a half of sobriety. And what I learned from that is that God uses my defects of character to keep me where he wants me to be. You see, because when I got sober in Palm Springs area, okay? Everybody looked too clean, too together. I felt too ashamed, and they were the attraction. I remember the first time I went to a women's stag meeting. It was all white women. I went with one Mexican chick. And she, in the middle of the meeting, she got up and she started pouring coffee. And I thought to myself, oh, they make the Mexicans do the coffee, huh? When I mentioned it to her, she said, no, Norma, they help keep me sober today, and I want to serve them. I love them. I want to give it back. And that's where I learned it. So when I was 14 months sober or 16 months sober, I came back to Los Angeles. I failed to tell you, even though I had those 7 affairs, even though I'd call up and break up, I was in a relationship for 12 years. I came back to Los Angeles to mend that relationship. I'm also here to tell you that you don't get all your loved ones back just because you get sober. I tried to mend that relationship for 5 years, and I could not. I got a job in Los Angeles, and I became self-supporting through my own contributions. And what happened is, I finished doing all my 12 steps by the time I was 9 months sober. It had to be that way for me because I've been around a long time. I heard a lot of things. I am grateful that that's the only thing I hadn't done, so I got busy and did them right away. So when I came back to Los Angeles, I started, my God, I got this job, and I wanted Arrowhead water delivered to the job, right? Well, my TRW was a mess. I didn't even know I made so many trips to the hospital. I had all these hospital bills. I had a gas bill in there for $60 back when gas bills were $1. It's like, oh my, I had all this stuff on my TRW. I had to start paying them one at a time, a payment at a time, make arrangements with them to make the payments. It took me 3 years to clear up my TRW. When my grandmother died, she left me a little money. And I was driving to a girlfriend's house. And I was singing and I was praising God. I was thanking him for allowing me to go there. And when I got to the house, I knocked on the door. And she said, get out of here. You better get out of here or I'm calling the cops. And I shake. I pause. I'm so grateful that God doesn't reveal everything at once. But when I paused, I remembered. You see, when I lived on the street, I'd pick up warrants and stuff, and then the cop would come around and he'd ask me my name. I wasn't going to give him my name because I had warrants. I didn't want to go to jail. So you have to think of somebody else? Well, she's who I thought of. So I picked up a few felony beefs in her name, and they picked her up for it. And I remembered as I'm standing in front of her door, by myself, with God. So when I paused and I asked God to help me, and I knocked on the door again, and I said that I was sorry for any pain I had caused her, that I wasn't there to win her friendship, that I was only there to right the wrong I had done, and she opened the door. And I went inside and I told her, I was describing in the book what I was doing there, and she listened, and her family listened, and they said, good, 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 and they didn't take my money because it wasn't a check. So I went home. 2 weeks later, they called me up. They say they want the money. I get upset. I have to call my sponsor. They should have took the money when I was offering it to them. All bets are off. They should have got it back then. And how sponsors are. They ruin stuff. And she says, Norma, just give them their money. You're just holding it for them. So, I had that job for 5.5 years, and that job got sold. And what happened is an hour before the takeover, they gave me my severance pay. And I was very devastated. And when I went home, I got all my belongings, and I was crying because I thought that job was what made me. I thought that relationship was who I was. And when I felt like I was grieving already that relationship, And then I thought, what is going to become of me? And I went and I got on my knees and I thank God for allowing me to experience the pain. You know, I'm always so quick to thank him for the good things. That day I thanked him for allowing me to experience the pain. And I remembered what Mother Teresa said. She said, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but she wished he didn't have so much confidence in her. I knew what she meant that day because it just seemed that the burden was so heavy. And anyway, I started looking for a job, and, you know, I love staying home. I don't know about you guys, but I love staying home. I love going to meetings. I love talking on the phone. I love staying home. But sponsors ruin things. They say things like we're self-supporting through our own contributions. I go, I'm self-supporting. It's my savings. It's my unemployment. She goes, what is it, Norma? I go, it's my savings. She goes, and that's what you do. I want you to put 3 resumes a week. So I'm all resentful. I know you guys don't get resentful at your sponsor. So I'm going through the paper all ticked off, you know. I pick 3 places I don't want to work. Facts on my resume. Anyway, this guy calls me up. To make a long story short, I go to this guy and go to this seminar just to make points. I didn't go there because I wanted the job. I went to make points to tell my sponsor I'm going any length, right? So then he takes me to his office and he tells me about the job, and I go, how much does it pay? And I said, oh, no, I can't work for that. I need $400 more a month. He goes, okay. And then he goes, so when can you start? I go, I need a 2-week vacation. He goes, okay. You see, last April 1st, I celebrated 3 years working there. It had turned out to be the best job that I ever had at that time. And what that has taught me is that I don't know what's good for you. I don't know what's good for me. And that company is having financial problems. And I need to be out of there because they cut my pay $1,000. And that job gave me self-worth. The program has taught me how to apply these principles in all of my affairs. And today I'm not a victim. So I started looking for another job. And I got a job right away. And I'm going to be moving to Orange County. And I'm going to be starting for another job. And I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid because God has a plan for me. You see, I've never did a good deed to deserve sobriety. I never planned any of the wonderful things that have happened to me. I have more than I need, and I definitely have more than I deserve. I have gotten to live 2 lifestyles in 1 lifetime. You know, God brought me to you, and you taught me about God. And I'm never going to do it the way you think I should do it. And I know I'm not going to do it the best way I could do it. But I thank God that I'm not doing it like I used to do it. Thank you.
Do we have any secretary's announcements? Does the secretary have an announcement?